All right, next up, Ben from Gensyn is here. And Gensyn has also kindly sponsored, I think 5 of our events, more than 5. And so really grateful to Ben for all the support, and couldn't have done it without Ben and Gensyn team. So thank you so much. All right, let's welcome Ben to the stage. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica. These events are always really good, which is why we sponsor them. I know that I don't have a timer, so you're going to have to signal me. Oh, great. I am terrible at running over in talks, so I'll try not to. Also, I'm going to experiment on you guys today because I hate making slides, but I like talking. And so I actually used co-work to make these slides. I've never done that before, so we'll see if it's any good or if it's terrible, and I'll decide whether or not I do it in the future. But in any case, I'm going to basically pitch to you as to why I think continual learning is inevitable. And there's a few assumptions I'm making along the way, which you'll have to decide whether or not you agree with them. But essentially, they revolve around the use cases of the financial markets themselves, how we interact with them as individuals, how machine learning will interact with the financial markets, and then how machine learning progresses, essentially. But to jump into things very quickly, who am I? I'm Ben, co-founder of Gensyn. My background is originally in machine learning research. So I did my PhD in evolutionary optimization of deep neural networks starting 11 years ago. And then after my PhD, I went into kind of founding businesses. I founded a data privacy company. That was about 8 years ago. And then 6 years ago, I founded Gensyn. And the entire point of Gensyn is to build the network for machine intelligence. We look at the resources underneath machine learning. We try and eliminate any bottlenecks on those resources, essentially. That involves building a lot of machine learning infrastructure, but also spiking out into the world of decentralization, because we see a lot of problems with centralization. It typically creates bottlenecks within resource access that we think can be eliminated by programmatic tech, essentially. And so we build that stuff, and that takes us into the crypto world sometimes. So that's the background. That's me and Gensyn. Moving on, I'm going to try not to redefine a bunch of things, but I have to have some definitions here, otherwise we're going to go all over the place. Some of these are bugbears for me. Like, I struggle with the definition of agents. At the moment, it's a wildly overloaded term. What I'm going to talk about, it kind of has 2 definitions, so I'm going to be specific about those. When I think of an agent within machine learning, I think about something that takes actions within a confined environment, but takes actions towards a certain goal. It requires some level of agency. So rather than instructing something step by step what to do, you instruct it what outcome you want, and it can take actions towards that outcome. But that is an agent in the kind of like computer science sense, I guess. There's also an agent in the financial sense, which is somebody who acts within a kind of financial system, who buys, sells, trades, etc. And so when we talk about anything financial, we'll mean that definition, but they overlap pretty heavily. Next up, we have prediction markets. People are probably pretty familiar with prediction markets, Polymarket, Kalshi, etc. They allow you to trade like predictions on things that happen in the future as they stand. I'm going to talk about why I think they're markets for information rather than just like straight up kind of betting or predictions. Next, we've got sovereignty. This is the concept that if you have agency over your own resources and the ability to build up some way of trading those resources, you have a form of sovereignty. Like, you can control your kind of destiny within whatever environment you operate within. We as humans have like a level of sovereignty within like the capitalist system, because we can like trade our specialities and then buy food, etc. And then finally, what is information? I like to define this because it's very fuzzy, but in what I'm going to talk about, information is very specifically what is created when you take an intelligence of some kind and apply it to raw data. The cleanest example I have is just like labeling something. Like, take an image and label it. Take an image of this room and say it's a conference room with a bunch of people in it. Add categories, etc. It's something that an intelligent being of some kind adds to that raw data in order to enrich it in some way. That is information. We need that for machine learning to progress. It's typically what you're using in order to train models. It's labels. It's like rewards, etc., etc. A few more definitions, I'll rattle through these. I go one step further with information to talk about alpha. I think alpha is something that when you have information about the world and you believe it's information that other people don't have, that's my definition of alpha. It's something that you think is an edge that you have. liquidity is capital traded in a market, kind of boring. Staking and slashing, we're not going to talk about that, but it's game theoretic security over a financial system, essentially. So if you wanted to create a form of security over a system where people are providing resources, you can get them to provide capital alongside those resources, and if you find they misbehave in that system, you can slash it, and therefore you've controlled behavior in some way. And then finally, decentralized physical infrastructure, networks that control like resources, essentially, using the concepts of staking and slashing and game theoretic security. People might already be familiar with this stuff, but I wanted to make sure it's clear. So we covered alpha. An example of alpha is, like I've set up there, if I know that asteroids hold enormous amounts of raw materials that are valuable, and I know that the technology is getting there that we could extract those materials and like trade them on the market, I may well go and trade that alpha that I have, that I think other people haven't realized this yet, by taking a position in a space company or a company that is saying they're going to go and mine asteroids. In doing that, I'm essentially monetizing the information I have. I'm trading my alpha, but I'm also doing another thing, which is I'm driving humanity forwards against that thing. And so I'm using my knowledge to give resources to the companies that might go and then mine those asteroids, because they have more resources, their kind of market cap as a company increases, they have more money to pursue their goals with, and they can go further. And so actually, I am part of the engine that drives human progress forwards with my beliefs, but I also benefit from trading my beliefs in that system. And so the financial markets, in a way, just operate like this. Like if I have a belief about the world, I can monetize that belief, that information, that alpha, by taking complex positions in different assets and then giving the resources to those companies. They go and do it. If they do well, I am rewarded. Therefore, I've traded my alpha. So humans do that right now, but it's very, very complex. What are prediction markets? In my view, prediction markets are actually just a wrapper on that in the fullness of time. They're basically a position, they're a kind of system where you can create a question in the world of absolutely anything, and you can allow people to take positions on that question. So we could, instead of me like going through that asteroid example and finding a space company, I could just say, you know what, I think humanity is going to go and mine asteroids. I want to just state that position out in the world, and I want to be financially rewarded for it. Somebody else might say, I don't think that's true, I'm going to take the opposite position, and then we've just created that market. I didn't need to take a position on the financial, the companies that sit behind it. If you get enough liquidity in markets like that, I believe the financial markets will just back those markets. And so in the fullness of time, as you build up this concept of taking positions on alpha with prediction markets, you actually create a system that merges with the financial system. And you end up with this kind of just better user experience for people interacting with the financial markets. I no longer have to take this extra step where I have to go and find space companies, figure out if they're legitimate, et cetera, and take a position. I can just be like, yeah, I think we're going to mine asteroids next year. Like, who wants to bet against me, basically? And this is quite nice for people. It's like a lot less cognitive load. So that is my argument that those things will merge, and that the financial markets underneath are the engine that drive humanity forward, as I mentioned before. So jumping kind of to the other side of this, the kind of more machine learning side, what are agents? We've talked about early on, agents is like an entity that takes actions within an environment towards a specific goal. My argument is alignment within the machine learning space is purely goal setting. Like we talk about alignment, lots of different companies talk about it as removing biases or creating safety or something like that. I think we can think about that with respect to individual positions. But if you think about long-term alignment of a technology, it, in my view, simply needs to reflect human alignment in the world. That is the fairest way for us to allow machine learning to grow. If I have a position as a person, as a human in the world, I should be able to augment that position with technology the same as anybody else can. It's a very kind of techno-neutral position to hold, but I believe it's the kind of fairest position for a new technology that doesn't lead to capture by like a specific ideology or a specific company. I think the financial markets at the moment represent that alignment for humans. And so as long as everybody can participate in those markets, the current prices of kind of all of the different assets and companies somewhat reflect the beliefs of humanity about what is happening. It can get captured in various weird social ways that we know about, but they're kind of limitations of human biology that we sort of have to work around. As long as we stay true to that, we've not got any worse than we could currently have with the way human society works. And so my view is if we align machine learning as a technology against the way humans are aligned by the financial markets, we probably have the most neutral way of progressing this technology. I talked about sovereignty before. In the human world, sovereignty is that point of like, if you can specialize, you have a specific skill. Once you've specialized, you're able to trade the resources you need to exist, and therefore you are a kind of sovereign being in the world. I believe this same thing can apply to AI models. If we can give them the ability to trade resources, which the decentralized world actually can provide, so decentralized physical infrastructure networks, etc. I'm not going to go into it here, how that's possible, but the technology that we build and other companies build actually makes that possible right now. You could have a machine learning model purchase execution of itself on a device somewhere in the world right now with trust assured programmatically and without humans involved. That is possible. It's not kind of at full scale yet, but it can happen. The problem you get to is, why is a machine learning model doing that? Like, why is it buying its own resources? We like to think about it because we think it's interesting, but it needs to have something to trade in return. Otherwise, there is no point in that happening. And most of the time when people talk about this, they think about it with a model being directed by a human. So that model is kind of given the resources that it can then go and buy its own execution. I don't think that's that interesting. I think it's more interesting if we explore what a machine learning model actually has to trade back. How can it be a participant in this system? What do models have to trade? Information. And so if you take the definition of information as being intelligence applied to raw data, essentially that's all a machine learning model is doing. It's taking some raw data of some kind, and it's doing intelligent processing on that data, and it's producing some kind of information. Categorization, predictions, labeling, etc. All of these things, it's able to do that just as humans are able to do that. And as we described before, when a human does it, they're able to then go and trade that information out in the financial markets to continue to be sovereign in a way. Our belief is AI agents will have that ability. They can trade that information back. It's actually the only thing they have to trade back in this system. They're not embodied. They don't have the ability to do physical labor, etc. If they did, it would still be at direction of that information system. And so actually, the more digital native version of goods that they have to trade is purely information itself. So how do they trade it? They can't really go direct to the financial markets. The financial markets have loads of human world infrastructure wrapped around them for various reasons. Some of it logistical back in the day when we designed the markets, or they grew organically to where they are today. They were only interacted with by humans, therefore they're only kind of native to humans. The world of crypto and decentralization very specifically moves that to be digital first. It's entirely programmatic. And so the belief is that AI agents will trade within that digital world. I don't think they're going to go straight to financial markets. I think they will create information and want to trade that information directly. The best UX for that is prediction markets or information markets. And so I talked a little bit about prediction markets before, like what are they? I like to use the term information markets more broadly because there's a kind of two-sided point to information markets. Basically, any prediction market is doing kind of two things. One, it's allowing you to trade alpha and information against a counterparty who is also in that market. But two, more crucially, in the kind of econ CS literature of information markets and prediction markets, is actually one big information elicitation or information aggregation system. If you create this market, you are able to elicit information from other people in the world. So instead of, in the first example, the counterparty being just somebody who wants to take a position against you, the counterparty could actually be somebody who just wants to know information. They could create a market, and in creating that market, they elicit information from anybody in the world. And that anybody in a digital world, if done on completely programmatic rails, could be a machine just as well as it could be a human. And I'll go through a worked example of this so it's a bit clearer in a minute. But crucially, you end up with then two reasons why somebody would create a prediction market. You could create a prediction market purely because you think it's an interesting thing to exist and you think people will participate. You're going to get revenue from that market. So in the standard prediction markets, you have a fee switch on the volume going through the markets. If you create the market, you earn that volume. Right now, you can't create markets on the popular platforms. They don't let you for various reasons that we'll also go into. If you could share in that those fees. The second piece is that information aggregation piece or elicitation piece. If you wanted to know something about the world, instead of you having to find somebody who knows that, you basically put out an open call to the world. If anybody has information about this thing, they are now immediately able to trade that information and earn a financial return. You can stand up the liquidity behind that if you want, if you really care about the answer, or you could hope that there are enough diverse opinions that they'll kind of trade against each other. It depends on the market. Ultimately, out of this, you get a form of truth. Because you have skin in the game, because people have incentives to sell real information into this market, if they didn't, they would lose money, you elicit truth from the world by putting essentially game theoretic security on them through their financial participation. So, worked example of the information elicitation point. If a shop owner, say there was a shop out here, and that shop owner knows that there's construction on the road outside their shop, and that construction is lowering footfall. Their revenue has gone down because there's construction going on. They really want to know when that's going to end so that they can do their projections. They could go out and they could try and find it. They could go and ask people. But in a world where they can create prediction markets or information markets, all they need to do is create a market that says, when will this construction end? Or will this construction end by X date? In doing that and seeding it with liquidity, they're creating an incentive for literally anyone in the world to trade information in that market. And if somebody believes that they have alpha, that information that other people don't have, they're incentivized to come and trade it because it's now essentially liquid against money. They can just receive money in exchange for giving that information. And so it's locally beneficial to everybody involved, which if you build a system of local incentives, you end up with a kind of beneficial whole as well. And the beneficial whole here is this kind of continual progress of machine learning. The reason that this market represents that information is specifically the price. And so throughout a prediction market or an information market, the price reflects the knowledge of every single participant at any point in time. Obviously, there are also biases involved, but because of the kind of stake that people have put in, the skin in the game, you eliminate those biases as much as you can to the point that somebody believes they're right, at least. Like, that's the best you can get. You're not necessarily going to kind of get underneath their beliefs. Ultimately, they're the ones staking the capital and kind of trading the market, but that's the closest you can get to actual truth. The problem you have is you need to be able to settle that market. You need to finally determine what actually is true at the end. For that, you need an oracle. In the current prediction markets, we use humans as oracles. Humans decide what the outcome of a specific event is. So the presidential election, for example, if you go on Polymarket, you trade the presidential election, there will be a construction of the market which says, based on all of these criteria, we're going to decide the way this market settles. And in Polymarket, they'll use a kind of stake-weighted human voting system. Those systems are very easy to capture. If you get enough value within them, the game theory falls apart, etc. They're kind of weak and brittle systems. The only way for us to establish truth across groups of humans is consensus, because we can't look inside the brain of a human. I cannot tell if you are lying. There's absolutely no way of me doing that. If you want to hide it from me as much as you possibly can, there's no way for you to prove to me beyond any doubt whatsoever that you are not lying. With machines, we can use these same consensus systems, and that's what blockchains do. They use consensus over machines to determine things, but we have one extra trick that we can do. So with the execution on a device, we can actually do that entirely deterministically, and we can re-execute the thinking process of a machine learning model. You cannot do that with a human. It requires a bunch of technology, and if you're interested, look at what we do. We build it. I'm not going to show it here, but it exists, and you can deterministically rerun the execution of a machine learning model. You can even step into its thought process, and you can inspect it. You can go in and audit every single stage of that thought process. We cannot do that with humans. And so this provides us this way of actually settling disputes, of which the end of a prediction market is simply a dispute. There are many other disputes in the world. If you wanted to kind of settle any contract between humans, you could settle that. If you wanted to settle anything that's subjective in natural language, you could settle that with these intelligences, and you could allow them to prove their thought process. This is something we just haven't had before. I'll leave what that does for the rest of the world. It's huge long term to another talk, but for here, we think about it with respect to finally establishing ground truth within information markets. If you don't have verifiability in an information market, settlement is very difficult. There's a lot of literature on peer prediction, et cetera, for how to do that. Here we show that you don't need it necessarily. So I've already talked through this. Basically, the creation of a market then becomes creating a specific prediction, an event in the future, deciding what criteria, what information is going to be used to settle that, and then picking an intelligence. And this is the crucial part. You have to pick a very specific digital intelligence that you're going to use to settle that market, and then at the end of the market, that intelligence is given all of those pieces of information that will be used to settle the market, and it is allowed to prove its thought process. It can do it entirely deterministically. Everybody else is then able to go in, rerun that, check if it was done correctly. You can create very kind of long and arduous arbitration processes for finally settling this. Ultimately, just believe me, you can settle it entirely programmatically, and you can have an answer that requires no humans at any point involved. If you create markets like that, you've created this system of entirely programmatic information elicitation and then settlement that can just scale infinitely, or infinitely towards technology. It doesn't require humans to scale. Crucially, that bottom piece I talked about, they are incorruptible judges in a way, these deterministic intelligences. We almost certainly don't need to go into trust here. So when you have this system that I've just described of two technologies, so you have information markets and the ability to elicit information, but also trade information in those markets, and you have agentic intelligence in the way I described, i.e. it's able to take actions in environments towards certain goals, etc. What I would argue is you actually create a form of sovereignty for digital intelligence, similar to the environment we exist in, the world where we can buy food, etc. Their environment is analogous, but it's slightly different. It's entirely digital, it's entirely programmatic, but the resources they require are similar to ours. They need compute power, we need to eat, they need raw data, we need our senses, etc. All of these things are actually able to be accessed by machine learning models in this world, and so they can become sovereign as long as they have something to trade in return. The final argument I have is this system leads to entirely continual learning. It's like a runaway reaction. And so if you provide the environment for them to trade the one thing that they create, which is information, and you simultaneously provide the environment for them to purchase the resources they require to exist, you scale the engine of human progress, which kind of the financial markets and the wisdom of the crowd predictions that we make, outside of biology. Right now, it kind of only scales by us creating humans. You can then scale just human society using technology. And this is a different way of doing it than the current centralized way where a lab would tell you, we have to build the intelligence, we have to decide how to apply it, we have to sell products to you, you will improve via those products, etc. I think all of that will happen. But the thing that's more interesting to me is this idea that we let machine learning models become sovereign entities within the systems we use, and then we just see what happens when they run in those systems. Because when we're left to run in those systems, it leads to progress. We create good information, we make good predictions as a crowd, and then those predictions are used to further target human progress and companies, et cetera, et cetera. If we allow a new digital being to be alongside us in that system, I think we get even better progress. Crucially though, it requires all of the technology involved to be open source. The only way you can do the arbitration, the trust, the judges, all of those other pieces is to have everybody be able to use this technology, audit it, understand it, etc. And so if we continue to build in this like centralized way, we will not allow this world to exist. I would finally argue that actually, if you view those financial markets as this kind of engine that drives progress, they actually become a reinforcement learning system, a parallelized system, where those agents are incentivized to learn back from the information markets themselves because they always want to be better. You have something, a Red Queen dynamic basically within a kind of optimization system where you're incentivized to survive, and when you're incentivized to survive, you have to continue to survive, you have to do everything you can. Getting information back from the markets is how you do that, and we've actually constructed the largest possible swarm-based optimization system you could possibly have, and it just so happens to be the optimization system the entire Western world runs on. So it's familiar to us, it's grown organically in human society. I think we can apply it to machine society as well. Finally, the choice that we have, we can allow that to exist in the bazaar, and people will probably remember the cathedral versus bazaar analogy, or we can allow centralized labs to dictate how this happens. I would make a further argument that the centralized labs actually act within this system anyway, so the whole thing is inevitable, but I think we can build it more deliberately to eliminate those power structures that are constructed that slow progress if we do it in that centralized sense. So we should build open source machine learning, we should allow it access to financial markets via the better UX of prediction markets, and then we should let that be an optimizer for continual machine learning progress, rather than allowing a very small number of companies to decide what that progress is, even though they're driven by the same dynamics at the top anyway. Financial markets are the thing that are driving them. I think it's just slower and it's worse for human society if we allow that to happen. That's it. Apologies for running over. Thank you.
Thank you. It was really good. Thank you so much. All right, next presentation is